do you know about legato? Well, before I get into any of that, I want to thank everyone who's been to my Bandcamp page to grab a copy of my Heimbach-inspired Isolation Loops sound pack. That's where all these sounds come from, which we'll use for the demo. We got 4 one-bar drum moods. These, basically. Now, essentially, each of them are set to a bar, loop-wise, and I'm going to, before I get started, kick in this mode and assign a key to trigger each of these clips. With the global quantize set to none, that's going to essentially allow me to play these sounds like a monophonic sampler, like so. There you go. Now, of course, each sound restarts from the beginning each time I press the key. What if I didn't want that to be the playback mode? You simply select them all, and with this little L engaged, it's not by default, pop it on, legato these dudes, and then when they're playing, watch the playhead. Just keeps on trucking. There you go. That's essentially a very important concept that I'm going to exploit in this video. I wondered, was there a way of getting this kind of behavior with a kind of Eurorack sequencer? And I looked around at what I had and thought, no. It's a shame because it's a really cool technique and I need it. We're going to use this machine. I've got 3 sounds loaded, simple 808 sounds. I just set this up so I could essentially make patterns which I knew would later be performed by the acoustic drums in tandem with this. So essentially we have a way to sequence. This is our simulation voltage that will be the theremin's output. I'm just going to take a voltage from here directly into the Eloquencer. These are our sounds. Here's a pattern. And this is the way most sequencers, and this sequencer, worked before. It would wait until the end of a phrase before playing the new pattern. Right, fine. Now, an additional feature which really changes things in here is essentially legato mode. So now, nice. So the thing is, that was just me manually triggering it. At the moment, the external CV is not engaged, so this will be our theremin simulation. We're going to put an external CV in to change the pattern. Now with this particular machine, the output is only 8 volts max, so I've had to make the scale a little higher than I would using the theremin. But let's watch. If we press play, now this device changes the patterns remotely. Remote control. Just what I wanted. Bam! Bam! What on earth is this? Smackety smack smack smack. The Polyend Perc Pro takes the sequencer signals and turns them into a thwack. We'll put that on a drum. And this is to prove that the theremin is indeed sending CV. Handy. Very handy. Now let's put all this together. NITTY! So this is the way the session looked after I recorded it. It had 9 tracks. 3 of the top ones are essentially from the acoustic kit. This is the sound of the Coles microphone, which was getting the whole room really. Here it is. Sounds very much like the room. It's okay. Definitely going to present some problems. We'll deal with those in a minute. Here is the lavalier mic inside the cheeky toilet roll. Definitely got more lows. It's a good sound. I mean, good. It's an Omni mic, so it gets, other stuff as well. Not ideal for isolating the kick, really. But, it fits inside the drum. It's a little bit cheeky. I wanted to, make myself some problems. That's all right. Here is a contact mic on the snare. At last, a real snare recording that you can work with. What a beauty. We'll see what we can do with that. I mean, we definitely got some challenges. Now, there were 3 audio files recorded from the assimilator. We've got the kick. Doofy doof 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 doof. A nice doofy and a nice snare. Playing. It's the patterns and the hi-hats. Now the rest of the tracks, steady on, are going to be MIDI. There was MIDI coming out of the Eloquencer. Now it looks quite crazy, this MIDI. It was tracking, I think, the CVs. There's a nice stable kick. And then a pattern that had some variation comes out some quite nice little melodic bits. So the kick, the snare and the hats in MIDI land sound like this. A little bit of music, And now the job is to make sense of all that and to turn it into something that sounds a little bit more chunky. Chunka. Chunka. Yes, as you can hear, there's now bass in this thing. What? Yeah, I took this loop from the new Oliver Power Tools 2 sample pack on Splice. Great stuff, as always. Amazing. Hats off to those guys. Just so good. Anyway, that helps immensely to turn this thing into a piece of music. Funny that, isn't it? And obviously we've got our live stuff, which is made of our mics. There's our room mic, our kick mic and snare stuff. We've got our 808 stuff, the kick, snare and hat. And we've got the MIDI stuff, which came in handy, which I populated with a few sounds. So let's begin muting everything but the live stuff and even further muting everything but our little room mic, our Coles here. I'll turn this off and I'll reveal that in a minute. Now, this is how it ended up sounding, the Coles. You can hear a lot of side chaining coming off the kick already. I'll turn that off. I juiced it up because the original sound recording was more like this. Didn't have enough fire, had way too much woof, so took out the woof, added a bit of fire with some juicers. Nothing rewriting the book. All this stuff is pretty commonplace. One thing that did stand out, and hence I'll mention it because this is going to be a fast run through here. I'm not going to go into super detail about all of the modifications I made to the track, but this was an important one. Adding this UAD emulation of the Neve 1073 at the end. It added level, of course, tons of level, but it added a nice presence that I was missing. So that was good. That was a little bit of a... I don't often put that one on the end of a chain, so I was happy with that. Here is... a phaser over the whole drum kit, which I just added from my Mutron biphase, which is a great stereo phaser. I printed it and just took some of the lows off and made it wide. So now we have our room mic, which is stereo and a lot more juicy, but taking up a lot of room. Listen. It's just a lot, isn't it? Imagining other sounds cutting through that. We've got a bit of work to do. So here's the lavalier mic that was in the kick drum in the toilet roll. Here we go. A pretty, some would say a poor choice for a microphone. But hey, let's see what we can do. Not bad. Taken out some of the highs with this guy, filtered those off, shortened it with this guy, and then added a gate. Much like a sort of front of house treatment of a kick drum. I don't often gate kicks. I find it can be quite aggressive, but in this case I wanted it quite sort of future, so I like that kind of harsh cut off. That's what happened to that lav mic. It turned out pretty alright in the end, actually. Quite a lot of lows and some character. So here's the it's a contact mic on the snare, rocking. Now, I mean, you know, I just added a tiny bit of non-linear verb, the RMX 16 emulation, just to give it some kind of space. And I made a second copy of it that's a bit more like, one's more. So you just got a little bit of that world coming through. So the whole real stuff sounds like this, the microphones and stuff that was tracked. There's a lot. Imagining adding sounds to that does seem a bit harrowing, but here we go. Here's the 808. A couple of things here. We've got the regular kick sound. Underneath is the kick sidechain, which you can see here is going to the Coles. Is it now? Coles. Oh yeah, not turned on. That's going to do something. Let's have a listen to that together. Just turn everything off but the sidechain and let's hear that. Turn this guy on here. It's doing a lot. It's already like carving it down. We need to do a lot more than that, but it's helping. So we've got the kick and it's providing a nice sidechain for our big clattery room mic. And we've just got some additional sounds here. This was something I wanted to point out that I discovered I kind of liked, which is the snare. Sounded a little bit... And I thought I'll try some Decapitator, I'll try some of the usual suspects. I didn't really like the way they were changing the sound, so I ended up using 2 copies of the 1073 here. Just blew out in a cool way. That was my takeaway from this one. I needed a strong snare because obviously that room mic's far away. The contact mic on the snare is not a snare sound. So we needed a big snare. So there's that snare. I actually added an additional trigger snare just to join in the party. 808s, 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 808s. We need something there to help this thing. Because really, this kick has some bass in it, but it doesn't have a lot of like, you know? So I wanted to add some that. Is what I wanted to add. So I added that to the kick. That's sounding good. So our 808 has an additional dufty to go off. Now let's see what the MIDI does. Tiny little bits, little spiky bits, which is kind of what I liked about it. Because when we had our kick, this big dufty kick, look. impressive as it is, that just helps for me. Especially with this kind of style, you want maybe a little spike, and often with those kind of kicks you have a little bit of stereo spread and stuff. It's a nice little something, isn't it? So we're going to add a little snare to that in the MIDI land, which is, you know, a bit lower. So our snares are... And this one has a heavy send to the nonlinear verb, so it's doing the send in a way, but from a lower pitch sound. You've got this sample selector scanning through various hi-hats. Just to give some kind of sense of a real hi-hat, really. It's a very small detail, but I saw it on the Twitch stream that the chap from Oliver did recently, and he reminded me of that. I haven't done that for a while in Ableton. That's a cool little trick. You can scan through various types of sounds, and then, you know, it sounds less static. With a hi-hat, that can be a real issue for me. I can find hi-hats can get really like, and you can really hear the sample if it just keeps hammering on, because there's a lot of them, I guess. So here we go. We've got the tracked MIDI. Nothing that fancy in there, but it's doing little clicky bits and additional 3D, I suppose. The kick extra, that's a nice dufty that goes with the 808, kind of completes this little world. And then the live stuff, but together it all just clattered along. And I was like, what on earth am I going to do? It's just like, ugh, horrible, like, information overload. Most of it, of course, is coming from the room mic, which has been blown out, which is cool for the sound character, but it just made it take up that much more room. And doing the sidechain off the kick, that's not the one. What I thought and what ended up working was taking a gate from the snare. So basically, the snare contact mic ended up coming in handy. It's a nice clear transient from that guy, nice and defined. And I just sent that in to control the on-off of all of this room stuff. So we ended up with this. Say in a small controlled section with just a kick. The whole thing is off, basically. Because look, with it on, the difference is immense, because it's kind of, I was noticing it getting too much hi-hat in that room was just making it go, and then it was just like, oh my God, shut up. So you just really were thinking, oh, what I want is like this room to kind of open up on the snare. What do you want in a beat like this? You really want kick and snare, you know what I mean? And then everything else can kind of fall into place. So that was good. I realized at the last minute, in a way, a gate that was triggered from the snare was a huge benefit. So we ended up more in this domain. Which is where we end this segment. Oh, actually, before we do, the master bass. All right, there's more of that coming. Hang on. It's got this, and it's got this. Okay? It's got a tape machine going into another tape machine going into a tube thing. And, you know, I usually put that on before I even start mixing. It's just to give me a little bit of joy, you know. Without it, we've got this. So the level going in from all the tracks is low in level, and I tend to do all my boosting here in this area. And yeah, there we go. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. See you next time.